Hello, my name is Joseph Jones, and welcome to day 3 of the Ability event. Today will be a lunch and learn conversation with Johileny Meran and Katrina Simmons talking about growing up in the ADA generation. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy the conversation.
Hello, my name is Shanta Sak. I'm a student at the University of St. Cloud State in the Rehabilitation Counseling Program. Here I have with me Johileny and Katrina. We'll be talking about, again, the growing up with the ADA. I will be asking 4 questions, so you ladies are ready. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Let's let them introduce themselves. I'm rushing everything.
Who should go first? Sorry, it's a little harder in the Zoom part.
Okay. Go ahead, Katrina. You can introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Katrina Simons, and I work for the University of Minnesota Institute on Community Integration. I'm a community program specialist there. I have cerebral palsy, and I use a power wheelchair, and I live in the Twin Cities.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Johileny Meran, and I am a program coordinator at Mobility International USA. I work on the National Disability and Exchange. I'm sorry. I'm a program coordinator at Mobility International USA, and I work on the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. It's a project sponsored by the Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Its goal is to increase the participation of people with disabilities participating in all sorts of international exchange opportunities. And I have cerebral palsy as well. I use a manual wheelchair to get around.
Thank you, ladies. So I would like to ask you ladies a few questions. So my first question for you is, what was it like growing up and going to school with ADA? How did that assist you? In terms of accessibilities and things like that.
Okay, well, I can go ahead and start with that one if that's okay with everybody. I went to a different school than my neighborhood school, because my neighborhood school, when I turned 6 to go to kindergarten, because my parents started us a year later than they might have otherwise, because we had summer birthdays. When I turned 6, my neighborhood school still didn't have a functioning elevator. But I loved the school that I went to, and it didn't have an elevator either, but it had ramps, and it was a small school, so that was really nice. It was also a Montessori-based program, which I think in some ways is more difficult for somebody with a physical disability, and in some ways is a really great plan for anybody who needs a little bit more flexibility in their learning. So those 2 things were great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I know that my parents might have been a little disappointed that I didn't get to go to elementary school with the neighborhood kids, but I felt like I got to make more friends in the end when I reflect on it. I really enjoyed it.
Great. I can take on the question next. I apologize, I didn't offer image description in the beginning. So an Afro-Latina, I'm wearing square glasses, have my curly hair to the side, and I'm wearing a white shirt with cherries on it, and a blazer, a black blazer. And behind me, you can just see my doorway. It's just a door to my room. But I have a different perspective to being part of the ADA generation because I immigrated to the States when I was 8 years old. So I know what it is to live without being impacted by the ADA, but I do still feel as part of the ADA generation because I came of age with it, and I do have that expectation of accessibility that my generation has. So I went to school, when I started school in the States, I was 8 years old, and I was very impressed because my school was physically accessible. As a wheelchair user, I could enter the school through ramps. There were elevators. I also had a paraprofessional with me to go around and help me with things like opening doors, and I also had accommodations so that I had extra time to take my tests, for example, which is something that I did not enjoy in my home country of Dominican Republic, where my cousins needed to go to school with me because otherwise I wouldn't be able to access the second floor of the school.
Okay, thank you so much. The experience is definitely an eye-open. Okay, after graduating high school, how did ADA help you in college? Go ahead, Katrina.
Okay, I also realized that I did not give an audio description of myself. So I'm sitting in a power chair in my living room, which also right now doubles as my home office. And I'm wearing a purple tank top and no blazer because I run hot. You can just see a bunch of lights, some of which are on and some of which are not on. My hair is pulled back in a pony. And the question, how did the ADA help with my college experience and college search? I think in the beginning it was just helpful because I knew that because of the ADA, colleges had to let me in. So they couldn't like say you can't come here because you have a disability. And then also I went to a school called University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and it's in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and it has and it's a barrier-free campus, so it's built to be accessible, and every state has a campus like that. And they had lots of extra resources on campus for students with all types of disabilities. So when I was looking for colleges, that was really helpful. And I just know that I was really glad that nobody could say you can't come here because you're a disability.
Okay, I'll go next, I guess. I think in college, as opposed to in high school, there was a lot more self-advocacy involved in trying to access my accommodations and different needs that I had. So I remember in high school, there used to be these individualized meetings, bless you, individualized meetings that my therapist and some of my teachers would attend yearly to discuss the observations that they had made about my progress, and then would come up with a plan to help me improve in certain areas. And I didn't attend those meetings until I was in 10th grade, where my grandma was also attending the meetings. So I had to translate for her and make sure that she was able to understand that the discussions that were going on. And in college, it was a little different because I didn't have those individualized meetings with like a group of professors and anybody else providing access. It was more like I needed to go to the disability office at my school and explain to them what access I needed, why I needed it. One of the things that was different was that I dormed while I was in college. So I had to request reasonable accommodations for living in school. So there was a lot more me trying to understand what my needs were and trying to understand how to explain that to my disability specialists or people that were working towards providing those accommodations. So I did learn that just in general with that high school to college transition, there's a lot more self-advocacy to be worked on.
A lot of learning how to swim, definitely. So when you graduate from college, how did the ADA assist you during job seeking and obtaining jobs?
Well, I was entitled to some job obtaining services through Voc Rehab and the state of Minnesota. And so that kind of helped me organize my resume and such. I wouldn't necessarily say it helped me land like the job of my dreams or anything, but it helped me have some access to services that otherwise I would have had to pay a lot of money for. So that was really nice. And then I had already learned quite a bit about disclosure and that whole process through some courses that I took in college. And so that was really helpful. And I know what I was most concerned about is how I would get to and from my job. And so that wasn't really covered under the ADA specifically, but it was really helpful to know that other people also had those concerns. Yeah, I think specifically what they helped me with is more resume building and things. And then when I went to go like interview for my job, I knew what disclosure was, which was really helpful. And I also knew that because I had a very visible disability and I need a lot of accommodations at work, that I was going to need to look for a job where a disability was an asset rather than a barrier. And so I was very straightforward at my job interviews about what I could and couldn't do and what I could offer to a position and what I couldn't. And I knew that without the ADA, that would not have been possible. So I just remember feeling very thankful for the ADA during that process.
Sure. So I think that in terms of employment, it was, again, for me, felt like another transition into like a different space and how to navigate the ADA and what it offered. So when I started searching for jobs, I definitely had help from, I guess, my the job center at my school in terms of working with my resume and the things that I should aim to highlight from my experience. But I do feel like I had struggles that particularly touch on how the ADA is a great legislation in terms of providing the rights and stating rights, especially on employment, but it's still somewhere that needs more awareness in terms of just people have a lot of misconceptions about how to accommodate an employee with a disability and what that may look like for their company. And I felt that like that cultural barrier was hard to navigate. I went on a couple of interviews where even though I had explained prior to my interview that I was a wheelchair user and needed an accessible entrance, I would be told, yeah, we have an elevator, and then I would show up to a place and it wasn't accessible. So that was a struggle I had to navigate. And then, but also I have learned in my job now that having these conversations openly with your employee and supervisor is definitely important and creates a better work environment. So I haven't been in a physical office yet. For example, I've been working remotely since I started. So I had to have a conversation about what were the things that I needed remotely that could help me do the job best. And some things I didn't know about, which is, I guess, where it comes into navigating the ADA in a different platform. Like I didn't know what type of accommodations I needed. So I got suggested to search in, I think the platform is called Jan, where basically you go and you look by disability and see what kind of accommodations are available in the workplace. And this was a resource that was given to me by my employer and something I had learned about earlier on as well. So that was helpful. And I think it just feels comfortable to be able to be in a place where I know that having that accommodation with my supervisor and my employers is something that is welcomed and not looked shameful upon.
Okay, hello? Sorry, I thought my thing was jumping off. So, lovely internet. Now we know that ADA has come a long ways for all of us to be able to access everything. However, there's definitely room to improve, and I wanted to know, how do you think that ADA could improve in terms of housing, transportations, and everyday living situation?
Well, to start with, I definitely like to see people with all types of disabilities having more access to housing and transportation, in terms of more programs from HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development Office at the federal level. But I also, just in general, at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota, we work primarily on behalf of individuals who live with some form of intellectual disability. And so I think about that a lot. And I don't really see how services are being distributed in an equitable way for people with intellectual disabilities to access them. So we might have a number of services that exist that could help people with intellectual disabilities, but it's very, very complicated to access those services, and there's tons of red tape, and almost to access some of them, you would need someone who specializes in the laws around them. And people with intellectual disabilities in particular might not have the funding to pay for those sorts of specialists to help them. So in general, I would like to see easier access for populations that live with intellectual disability. Would be the next step that I would like, one of the next steps that I would like to see the ADA to take.
So Shanta, actually, I was wondering how if we can backtrack a little bit to question 3, how your employment, accessibility to employment, I guess, was improved by the ADA, or how your experience was in that field. Before I take on question 4,
Sure.
we have some time.
Yeah, my experience is definitely also obvious when I definitely go to interviews. I have a guide dog, and so when I walk in, it's already I'm already disclosing it, and a lot of times I either we already filled the position, your screen reader software wouldn't work. At times I didn't get an interview. And so having worked at US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I knew some of the rights, some of the ADA things, and so I was able to advocate for myself in regards of that, and get the company to take some responsibility in terms of that. But it's definitely difficult to seek jobs as an individual who's blind, because you need to be able to, you know, definitely write a resume and be able to see that it's in lines okay. And the current services SSB they may have, which is State Services for the Blind, I feel that we need a bit more one-on-one in terms of resume writing and learning how to dress appropriately and things like that. So those are the things that we just need to be able to educate young people to do, which now I'm kind of doing that with young people through my work and dealing with kids who have a disability and learning EEOC laws and things like that, and learning how to appropriately disclose their disability and when to do that. And teaching them the experiences that they may have or encounter as a person with disability. So it's definitely interesting, and it's a struggle, and we have a lot of room to definitely do more in terms of everything all around, including job searching, interviews, and the employers definitely needs to know that they cannot discriminate, and some of them are outright discriminatory and they don't know that, and the term of they don't know better is an excuse. So we definitely need to do better.
Yeah, thank you, Shanta. Actually, yeah, that's a very good point that you made there. Sometimes it's not in the forefront, or it's done in a way that can't really notice. Most recently, as part of the project of trying to increase people with disabilities participation in international exchange opportunities, at MyUSO, we also talk about increasing the amount of people with disabilities working in the international exchange field. And we have some resources both for students with disabilities or professionals with disabilities that are interested in starting an international exchange career. And we also have resources for employers to understand how to tap into that often not looked into pool of very talented potential employees with disabilities. So I think it's definitely an area that can still be improved in terms of, we're talking about what are the other areas that we can improve in. So employment and recruiting people with disabilities to work is definitely one of them. I think that with my perspective of being an immigrant to the US, and just understanding the privilege really that we have because of the ADA, but also understanding that there is room for improvement, and that the ADA is basically a good start to go from. And I think that in terms of just access to services for people with disabilities, there's a lot more conversation that needs to happen in terms of the access to healthcare that people with disabilities have. I know that I've read a lot of articles recently about how the global pandemic right now affects specifically people with disabilities, and what that means on a day-to-day, and perhaps even some of the fears that people with disabilities are struggling with because of just not knowing what their experience might be if they were to be affected by COVID. I've also learned from just my academic background. I graduated with a global public health and sociology bachelor's of arts, and I spoke a lot about, learned a lot about I guess, emergency response and preparedness, and how people with disabilities are often left out of conversations in terms of what preparations need to be made for emergencies. And the global pandemic is just one example of the type of emergency, but let's say natural disasters is one. And if people with disabilities aren't at the table, offering some of the obstacles that come with having a disability and trying to navigate an emergency, then those things are not being taken into account when the planning is occurring. I also have seen that there's, at least with my job at MIUSA, we talk a lot about just what are some best practices for international exchange professionals to offer support to students with disabilities. And although the ADA doesn't apply abroad, there's a lot of resources and support that both disability specialists, professionals, and international exchange professionals can offer students with disabilities so that they feel supported through that process. And there's also learning about what the disability records are for students with disabilities that go to other countries, as well as international students that come to the US to study. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't know is that the ADA is a territory law. So it means that, basically means that anyone with a disability who is in the US can benefit from the laws that the ADA has. So if you have a disability and you're in the US, you are entitled to services and supports, specifically talking about students coming to study. I hope that was not a lot, but I think those are just three areas that the ADA can still be improved in, and that are supports that people don't know about from the offhand.
Hi everyone, this is Katie Ramos. I work at St. Cloud State, and I just am chiming in because I'm not sure if we lost Shanta. I know that her call got dropped earlier today, so I just wanted to chime in, but yes, I'll start my video so you guys can see. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So again, my name is Katie, and I work at St. Cloud State, and I have long brown hair, and I'm wearing a blue t-shirt today, and I'm actually on campus today. So why don't we move it into the question and answer? And Shanta, if you pop in, I'll let you take over. But okay, so we got a few questions from the audience for you guys. But here's a question and either Johileny or Katrina, you can answer this. What advice do you have for young people with disabilities in developing countries on advocating for their needs?
Johileny, I think you have more experience in that than I do. I have been to Nicaragua, and I've done some mentoring work there, but I don't speak Spanish, so it's not like flawless. But I do think that unfortunately in the parts of the country that I was in, I would just like for people with disabilities to be able to like sit up and have access to like a wheelchair at all at this point. That is kind of what I saw. There were a lot of people that were bedridden because they didn't have the ability to have the equipment they needed, or since they didn't have medical care, they had so much skin breakdown that there was tons of infections. So I literally would just like to see like basic acute medical care in developing countries, at least the one that I've been to, only one. But I think Johileny probably knows more about that than I do.
Thank you, Katrina. And that's still a valid point to think about. There definitely needs to be, I think, more resources for young people with disabilities in developing countries. And I know that there's a lot of work around that being done, and there's still room for improvement, as with many things. But I mentioned earlier that students with disabilities traveling abroad should know about the disability rights in the countries that they're traveling to. And one of the resources that we have available talks specifically on this point. And one of the, I guess, recommendations in the article that we have is to look into the United States Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and look into whether the place that you're going to abroad, studying abroad to, has signed on to this legislation, and what are the particular local laws that can apply to you when you go abroad. I think that a lot of people don't know about this legislation in particular, but I think that the difference I've heard from my colleagues and from people that I've worked with, that the difference between the CRPD, as it's called, and the ADA is that the ADA has implementation processes, whereas the CRPD is something that you sign on to, but it's up to the individual countries to decide to put some implementation processes that they can take on. So it definitely varies by country, and I think that one of the things that I learned myself traveling abroad and just studying abroad and living abroad, because I'm from another country, is that you really need to just accept that the environment is different, but also know that like everywhere in the world, there are people with disabilities living there. So it is possible to be there. It's just a different environment than the one that you're used to.
That's a great point. Okay, we're getting a lot of great questions, so I'm trying to filter through. But here's a question. So women with disabilities often have even greater challenges in advocating for their rights. As young women with disabilities, can you speak specifically on advice for young women with disabilities on advocacy for their needs? So any advice for you?
Yeah. So I think I saw that more when I wanted to take like the really challenging science classes, but I wasn't strong. I didn't end up going into science, so I should probably preface with that. But I guess when I saw the difference between men and women, or really boys and girls, because this was way back in junior high, I was not encouraged to pursue even anything like related to science or math, and I felt like the males that I went to school with, even those with disabilities, were given more opportunities to do like robotics club and like chemistry club and things like that, and I'm not really sure where that came from. Maybe the chemistry teacher didn't like me. I'm not sure, but I think so I think what we're getting at here is there's like there's confidence issues on top of competence issues, and I think a lot of that could be ameliorated by maybe doing more extracurriculars outside of the classroom. They're involved in science and things like that, science and math. In my case, I don't know the answer for everybody.
Thank you, Katrina. That's a good point. Going up, what you experienced, just starting with being a woman or being a young girl is a lot different than our other counterparts. So I think that myself, I identify as a woman, and I think that some of my personal struggles with just growing up this way is that I had to learn how to advocate for myself. That is one skill that I definitely encourage young women with disabilities to practice and take on. I think that it's definitely important for young women with disabilities to use their voice. There's a lot of conversation around people finding their voice, but I think you always have your voice. You just need to find a way to use it in the way that you're going to receive your what you need, and also to not be discouraged by other people who may assume what you can't and can't do. The only person that can decide that is you, basically. You need to believe in you have a disability, and you have your own abilities and your own dreams and desires, and it's important for you to pursue those despite what anybody else may think, because the expert in you is you. So I definitely encourage young women to participate in as many things as they would like to. I also think that a lot of what I've experienced, I've learned that you have to insert your disability into the conversation. There's a lot of conversation around women's health and just women's rights, and often disability can be left out of those conversations, but the truth is that women with disabilities are part of that conversation and need to be included. We need to talk about what access to healthcare for women with disabilities is like, and what that experience is like. We also have to learn to talk about abuse within women with disabilities, and just how to approach that conversation. Later this week, Susan Siegel, this co-founder and CEO of Mobility International, is going to be talking about our WILD program at Mobility International, and that is a women's leadership institute, and you'll learn if this is something that you really want to learn about and want to know more about. I know that one of the things that I was really excited to learn about when I first learned about Mobility International was the WILD program, because it's amazing to see how the leadership of other women with disabilities around the world. And this program is just basically a cohort of amazing women from around the world that come together and talk about advocacy, talk about issues that affect women, and again, bring disability into the conversation and talk about issues that affect them. So if this is something that you're interested in, I definitely encourage you to continue to follow the Ability program, and stay tuned for Susan Siegel's talk.
Johileny, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So for those of you interested, on this Friday, so that would be July 30th, I believe. Nope, that would be July 31st. So this Friday, July 31st, we're going to have Susan Siegel with us live at 4:30. So you can mark your calendar. 4:30 on Friday. I just wanted to bring Shantha back into the conversation. If you wanted to, we've got a lot of great questions here. Shantha,
you'll can go ahead and just read the questions. I'm actually on the phone, so my computer isn't working with the internet.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm glad you can still be here with us. All right. And I apologize in advance if I don't get to your question because we've got a lot of great questions. Okay. Okay, well, we can ask this one. Please, can you share your reflection on the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and the position of the U.S. on this convention?
I can start.
Okay.
Yes. I think I mentioned it earlier, but learning about the CRPD and just when you're traveling specifically is a great resource to start with. The CRPD was modeled after the ADA, and there's a lot of conversation about the U.S. and its relationship with the CRPD. It would be hard to start that conversation here in just the few minutes that we have, but it's definitely important for Americans with disabilities and for people around the world with disabilities to be aware of this legislation and to know that this is something that is not international, but that applies very differently locally. So that's why it's important to just do some research into what that means, where you're going or where you're intended to visit, or if you're an international person with a disability, to understand what your disability rights are in your country.
I guess I would have liked to see more language from that convention around how we can make sure that more people from countries that are developing, and even among those developing countries, the ones that are struggling the most, how we can make sure that people with disability in those countries are given like access to like food and water. I guess I'm not prepared to speak on how to move the global conversation forward other than that. That's kind of where I am at.
Yeah.
With that.
Thank you. Well, and maybe Katrina, you guys can speak to this as well, but kind of a follow-up question. So how can more young people with disabilities be involved in politics? Like where would they start? What would you say?
Well, as a young person with a disability, I think that it right now, specifically, there's so much going on virtually, and that has allowed a lot of people to have more access to things that they would otherwise not have access to due to difficulty with transportation or getting around in their countries. And I would definitely encourage young people to research disability rights. I was not very aware as a young person just how important it is to be politically involved with just knowing what the position, what kind of policies affect people. All policies affect people with disabilities. That's just one way of understanding things. Whether it's a policy on women's rights, whether it's a policy on housing, transportation, it all affects people with disabilities. So if you're particularly interested in a certain subject, or if you're wondering why you don't have access to a certain thing, then the best thing to do is to research what kind of conversation around disability is happening in terms of that topic. I've also learned a lot through social media, where it's sort of spiked my interest in research, because I hear one thing about a certain policy, and then I am intrigued to learn more. So definitely right now, I think one thing you can do is follow the hashtag ADA30, or hashtag thanks to the ADA. Is one. There are many other hashtags, might not remember all of them, but definitely follow those too. And as well, look into disability rights advocates and activists, and follow them on social media. Like I said, sometimes you see a small caption or a picture or just a quote, and then you're intrigued to research more about a particular thing. So that's definitely one way to start getting engaged politically.
Thank you. That was great. Johileny, can you just, for the audience, can you repeat those hashtags again?
Yes, of course. It's hashtag ADA30
ADA30.
and hashtag thanks to the ADA.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, okay, let's just do, maybe we'll do one more question. Okay. Let's see. I guess we'll end with this one. Okay, so what advice do you have for parents with children with disabilities to ensure their educational rights are met?
I'm gonna take it way basic for this one. I think you should teach your kids to talk about their strengths more. I meet with so many young people today and before today in this time. I don't meet with them now because of COVID, but I have in the past, in the recent past. And I'm just gonna say teach them how to talk about their strengths. I know so many kids that can list off all the things that they need help with and all the things that they can't do, but we forget to tell them to like talk about their strengths and to teach them how to talk about what they can bring to the table versus what they need at the table, which are both really important skills for life.
Yeah. Katrina, I definitely agree. It's important to know your needs and how they need to be met, but it's also important to know your strengths. So that's definitely something to bring to the table. I think parents are very passionate about advocating for kids with disabilities, and I commend that, and I think that's really important and really great. But I think as your child grows and becomes a part of the community, is important to also have them in those conversations where you're advocating for them, so that they can learn how to advocate for themselves. Again, one of the things that I had to learn through experience was self-advocacy, and that's not something that is taught in the academic setting. In school, you're not taught how to advocate for yourself. So it's important for parents to take on that role of not just advocating for their kids, but also teaching and empowering their kids with disabilities to advocate for themselves. It's a conversation that needs to happen as soon as they are able to say, well, I have this disability. Well, okay, great. Then how do you advocate for yourself in that sense? I think that parents just need to have those kids in the conversations early on and allow them to learn. it takes a lot of courage, and it's really hard. I remember myself being a young child with a disability and just being very hesitant to speak for myself, often speaking in a very low, shy, kind of hard to listen to way and approach of doing things because I was scared. And then I would be encouraged by my teachers and my paraprofessionals and my family to speak up, because otherwise people are not going to be listening, or they'll look to someone else to explain what you want and what you need. So definitely it takes time, and it's painful, but it's really, really beneficial and helpful in the long run.
Well, thank you both for being with us today. That was such a treat to hear your personal stories and then just have you take questions from the audience. And I feel like that was such a blessing to listen to you guys. I just wanted to announce to everyone here that tomorrow we're going to have, so tomorrow at 7:30 p.m., we are going to have a discussion on the U.S.-China Deaf Project and the research of Drs. Amy Knopf and Dr. Kathy Johnson. And then we'll also have Shai Rong visiting. He's a visiting scholar to St. Cloud State, but he's actually from China. So I believe he's in the United States right now. But either way, so please join us at 7:30 tomorrow. But thank you, Katrina and Johileny, and also thank you, Shantha, for leading us through the discussion. But hopefully we will all see you guys all tomorrow. So
thanks so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions about traveling with a disability for international exchange opportunities, definitely go to MIUSA's website and learn more about the resources. Thank you.
Thank you.